The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of the alien planet, its hull groaning under the strain. Inside, a group of human soldiers, battle-hardened and resolute, exchanged grim looks. They had been captured during a fierce engagement with the Zerith Empire, a technologically advanced alien race known for their ruthlessness. The humans were part of the Earth Defense Force, elite soldiers trained to protect humanity from extraterrestrial threats. Among them was Captain Marcus Steele, a seasoned leader known for his tactical genius and unbreakable spirit. As the ship descended, he scanned the faces of his men, seeing a mix of fear and determination. They were headed to a place that few had ever escaped from, the unbreakable prison. The prison loomed large as they approached, a massive fortress built into the side of a mountain. Its walls were lined with shimmering force fields and guarded by automated turrets. The Zerith had boasted that no one could escape from this fortress, and it was designed to break the spirit of its inmates. As the ship landed, the soldiers were herded out by their captors, hulking aliens with dark, chitinous armor and glowing red eyes. They were led through a series of security checkpoints, each more imposing than the last. Finally, they reached the central cell block, a cavernous space filled with cells stacked on top of each other. The air was thick with despair, and the distant sounds of prisoners echoed through the halls. Captain Steele was shoved into a cell with several of his men. The door closed with a heavy thud, sealing them in. They looked around, taking in their new surroundings. The cell was bare, with only a few bunks and a small sanitation area. There were no windows, and the only light came from a dim strip along the ceiling. Despite the bleakness, Steele felt a surge of determination. They were soldiers, trained to overcome adversity. He knew that they had to start planning their escape immediately. He gathered his men and began to assess their situation. Each soldier brought unique skills to the table, and Steele knew they would need every bit of ingenuity and resourcefulness they could muster to escape this place. In the days following their arrival, the soldiers focused on gathering intelligence about the prison. They observed the routines of the guards, the shifts, and the layout of the facility. The Zerith guards were methodical and efficient, but they had one weakness: overconfidence. The prisoners were subjected to a strict regime, but Steele and his men managed to communicate discreetly, sharing observations and formulating a plan. They learned that the force fields surrounding the cells were designed to prevent any unauthorized access, but there were maintenance cycles during which the fields were temporarily deactivated for brief periods. Corporal Jessica Haynes, a former engineer, took a keen interest in the force fields. She had a knack for understanding alien technology and quickly began devising a way to exploit the maintenance cycles. Haynes hypothesized that if they could time their escape precisely, they could slip through the force field before it reactivated. Meanwhile, Sergeant Alex Reed, a former scout, focused on mapping out the prison's interior. Using scraps of paper and charcoal, he created detailed maps of the cell block, the guard stations, and the corridors leading to the exterior. As the soldiers gathered more information, they began to piece together a plan. They would need to create a diversion to draw the guards away from their cells. Private First Class David Martinez, a demolitions expert, suggested using improvised explosives to cause a commotion. They scavenged materials from their surroundings, finding ways to make small but effective explosive devices. Each step of the plan required precision and timing, and the soldiers knew that one mistake could mean the difference between freedom and death. Steele called a meeting in their cell, gathering his team around. "We've been through worse," he began, his voice steady and confident. "We know what we're up against and we have a plan. It won't be easy, but we have the element of surprise on our side. We'll execute this plan in stages, and if we stick together, we can make it out of here." The soldiers nodded, their faces set with determination. They knew the risks, but they also knew that they had no other choice. It was escape or die trying. The day of the escape dawned like any other, with the soldiers going through their routine under the watchful eyes of the Zerith guards. But beneath their calm exteriors, they were tense, each of them mentally rehearsing their roles. They had synchronized their watches, and every second counted. Corporal Haynes had calculated the precise timing of the maintenance cycles, and they had chosen a moment when the force fields would be down for just under a minute. It wasn't much time, but it was enough if they acted quickly. Private Martinez prepared the explosives in the privacy of their cell, using a combination of stolen chemicals and makeshift detonators. He placed the devices in strategic locations around the cell block, where they would cause maximum disruption without causing unnecessary harm to the prisoners. The plan hinged on the chaos that would follow the explosions, drawing the guards away from the cells just long enough for the soldiers to make their move. At the appointed time, Steele gave the signal. Martinez triggered the explosives, and a series of loud bangs reverberated through the cell block. Smoke and debris filled the air, and the sound of alarms blaring added to the confusion. The guards scrambled to respond, shouting orders and rushing towards the source of the explosions. Steele and his men took advantage of the chaos, moving swiftly and silently through the corridors. They reached the force field just as it deactivated for its maintenance cycle, slipping through the gap and into the next section of the prison. They moved quickly, knowing that their window of opportunity was limited. Sergeant Reed led the way, using his maps to navigate through the labyrinthine corridors. They encountered a few guards along the way, but they were able to neutralize them with a combination of stealth and brute force. The soldiers had trained for this moment, and their skills and discipline paid off as they made their way towards the exterior of the prison. They had to stay focused, knowing that one misstep could bring the entire plan crashing down. As they neared the outer perimeter, they encountered a final obstacle, a heavily guarded gate that led to the outside world. They had anticipated this and had prepared for a direct confrontation. Captain Steele took charge, coordinating a well-timed assault on the guards. They moved with military precision, taking down the guards quickly and efficiently. With the gate secured, they prepared for the final phase of their escape. The air was thick with tension, but also with a sense of hope. They were almost there. With the gate in their sights, the soldiers knew they were close to freedom. But the Zerith were relentless, and reinforcements were already on their way. Steele and his men had to move fast. They secured the gate, using the guards' own weapons against them. Haynes worked on bypassing the security systems, her fingers flying over the alien controls. The gate began to open, and a blast of fresh air filled their lungs, invigorating them. It was the first taste of freedom they'd had in weeks, and it fueled their determination. As they exited the gate, they found themselves in a large courtyard surrounded by high walls. The perimeter was patrolled by drones, their sensors scanning for any signs of escape. Reed had identified a weak spot in the drone coverage, and they moved quickly, staying low and using the shadows for cover. They reached a maintenance shed where they found tools and equipment that could help them disable the drones. Martinez rigged up a device to interfere with the drone's sensors, giving them a narrow window to cross the courtyard. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their training kicking in as they navigated the final obstacles. They encountered more guards, but their resolve was unshakable. Steele led the charge, his leadership inspiring his men to push through the pain and exhaustion. They reached the outer wall and began to scale it, using ropes and grappling hooks they had fashioned from materials inside the prison. It was a daunting climb, but the thought of freedom kept them going. They reached the top of the wall and looked out over the landscape beyond. It was a harsh, barren wasteland, but it was a path to freedom. They began their descent, each soldier helping the next, ensuring that no one was left behind. As they reached the ground, they heard the sound of alarms and the distant shouts of Zerith soldiers. They knew they had to keep moving, and they set off into the wasteland, leaving the prison behind. Steele led them towards a rendezvous point they had identified from their maps. It was a risky move, but they had no other choice. They moved quickly, their eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. They knew that the Zereth would not give up easily, but they were prepared to fight for their freedom. As they reached the rendezvous point, they found a hidden cache of supplies and weapons left by a previous escapee. It was a stroke of luck, and it gave them the boost they needed to keep going. The wasteland stretched out before them, an unforgiving expanse of rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. The soldiers moved cautiously, conserving their energy and staying alert for any signs of danger. They knew that the Zereth would be searching for them, and they had to stay one step ahead. They traveled by night, using the stars to navigate, and rested during the day, finding shelter where they could. The harsh environment tested their endurance, but they were determined to survive. Steele led his men with unwavering resolve, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They shared what little food and water they could find, and took turns keeping watch. The nights were cold, and the days scorching, but their training and discipline kept them focused. They encountered various alien creatures, some dangerous, others merely curious. Each encounter was a reminder of the hostile world they were navigating, but also of their resilience and adaptability. As they journeyed further into the wasteland, they came across signs of previous inhabitants, ruined structures and abandoned settlements. These remnants told a story of a once thriving civilization that had been wiped out, likely by the Zereth. The sight of these ruins strengthened their resolve to escape and warn humanity about the true nature of the Zereth Empire. They scavenged what they could from the ruins, finding useful tools and supplies that would aid their escape. One night, as they camped in the shadow of a crumbling tower, they heard the distant hum of Zereth patrol ships. The soldiers quickly doused their fire and took cover, watching as the ships passed overhead. The patrols were a constant reminder that they were not yet free and that their every move was being monitored. Steele knew they needed to find a way off the planet, and fast. He began to formulate a plan to hijack one of the patrol ships, a risky move but their best chance at escape. The soldiers spent the next few days observing the patrol routes, noting the patterns and timing of the Zereth ships. They found a spot where the patrols were less frequent, a remote canyon that provided natural cover. Steele decided that this would be the place to execute their plan. They prepared meticulously, making sure every detail was accounted for. They fashioned weapons from the materials they had scavenged and practiced their roles until everyone knew exactly what to do. On the night of the hijack, they lay in wait, hidden among the rocks. The tension was palpable as they listened for the sound of the approaching patrol ship. When it finally arrived, they sprang into action. Martinez used his explosives to create a diversion, drawing the guards away from the ship. The soldiers moved swiftly, taking out the remaining guards with silent precision. Haynes hacked into the ship's controls, overriding the security systems and opening the hatch. They boarded the ship, Steele leading the way. The interior was stark and utilitarian, designed for functionality rather than comfort. They secured the ship and quickly took their positions. Haynes powered up the engines, while Reed kept watch. As the ship lifted off, they knew that the hardest part was yet to come. They had to navigate through the planet's defenses and evade the Zereth fleet that patrolled the sector. As they ascended, alarms blared, and the ship's sensors lit up with warnings. The Zereth were aware of the hijack and were scrambling to intercept them. Steele barked orders, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. Haynes maneuvered the ship with skill, weaving through the anti-aircraft fire and evading the pursuing ships. The soldiers manned the weapon systems, returning fire and buying them precious time. The battle in the sky was intense, with laser blasts and explosions lighting up the darkness. The soldiers fought with everything they had, knowing that failure was not an option. They sustained damage, but Haynes managed to keep the ship flying. Reed provided updates on their pursuers, his eyes glued to the sensors. The Zereth ships were relentless, but the human soldiers' determination and teamwork gave them an edge. They broke through the planet's atmosphere and into space, where the real challenge began. The Zereth fleet was vast, and escaping it would require every ounce of skill and luck they possessed. Steele directed them towards a nearby asteroid field, hoping to use it as cover. Haynes pushed the ship to its limits, navigating through the treacherous terrain. The asteroids provided some cover, but the Zereth were close behind. The asteroid field was a labyrinth of floating rocks, each one capable of destroying their ship on impact. Haynes piloted with surgical precision, weaving through the obstacles with a mix of intuition and skill. The soldiers held on, bracing themselves against the violent maneuvers. The Zereth ships followed, but their larger size made it harder for them to navigate the tight spaces. This gave the humans a slight advantage. Steele coordinated their defense, using the asteroids to shield them from incoming fire. Martinez deployed mines, creating further obstacles for their pursuers. The ship's shields were weakening, and they could feel the impacts of near misses. Despite the odds, their spirits remained high. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel, a clear path leading out of the asteroid field and into open space. With a final burst of speed, Haynes guided the ship out of the asteroid field. The Zereth ships were forced to pull back, unable to follow through the narrow passage. The soldiers cheered, their relief palpable. They had made it through one of the most dangerous parts of their journey, but they knew they couldn't rest yet. Steele set a course for a nearby star system, hoping to find refuge and make contact with the Earth Defense Force. The star system they entered was remote and largely uncharted, a perfect place to hide from the Zereth. They found a small planet with a breathable atmosphere and landed in a secluded valley. The soldiers took stock of their situation, assessing the damage to the ship and their supplies. They knew they needed to make contact with their allies, but their communication systems were damaged in the escape. Steele sent out scouts to explore the surrounding area, while Haynes worked on repairing the ship. They found signs of life, a small settlement of humanoid aliens who had also fled from the Zereth. These refugees were wary but sympathetic to the humans' plight. They provided food and medical supplies, helping the soldiers regain their strength. In return, Steele and his men shared their knowledge and offered their assistance. With the help of the settlers, Haynes managed to repair the communication systems. They sent out a distress signal, hoping to reach any nearby Earth Defense Force ships. As they waited for a response, they prepared for the possibility of another Zereth attack. They fortified their position and trained the settlers in basic defense tactics. The bond between the humans and the settlers grew, united by a common enemy and the will to survive. Days turned into weeks, and still no response to their distress signal. The soldiers grew restless, knowing that the Zereth could find them at any moment. Steele maintained their morale, keeping them focused on their training and preparations. Then, one fateful day, their worst fears were realized. Zereth scout ships appeared on the horizon, and the alarm was raised. The soldiers and settlers took their positions, ready for the fight of their lives. The battle was fierce, with the Zereth attacking with overwhelming force. Steele and his men fought valiantly, using every trick and tactic they knew. The settlers proved to be brave and resourceful, standing shoulder to shoulder with the human soldiers. Despite being outnumbered, their determination and unity gave them strength. The Zereth had not anticipated such fierce resistance, and their ranks began to waver. As the battle raged on, a miracle occurred. Earth Defense Force ships arrived, having received the distress signal at last. They swooped in, providing much-needed reinforcements and firepower. The tide of the battle turned, and the Zereth were forced to retreat. The soldiers and settlers cheered, their victory hard-earned and well-deserved. They had survived the unbreakable prison and the harsh wasteland, and now they stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Captain Steele looked at his men, pride swelling in his chest. They had done the impossible, and their story would be told for generations. The unbreakable prison had not broken them. Instead, it had forged them into something stronger. They had escaped, not just with their lives, but with a renewed sense of hope and unity. The Zereth Empire had underestimated the spirit of humanity, and that was a mistake they would never make again.